listener production.
Hey, Chris Spyrou with you. Welcome to The Briefing. If I asked you to think about one of Australia's most powerful and influential unions, what do you think its day-to-day looks like?
The construction union on Monday was helping bikies onto sites. On Tuesday, it was telling the Labor Party who to place into state and federal parliament.
With fresh accusations of firebombing family homes and government-backed sites, the CFMEU is never far from news. A look at how and why is coming up in the second half of this episode. First though, let's get into the headlines with Tara Cassidy. It's Thursday, the 22nd of May.
Hey Chris, and to you listening, we start this morning in New South Wales where nearly 50,000 people have been isolated by what's being labelled a 1 in 500 year flooding event. Taree, which is about 130 kilometres northeast of Newcastle, has been inundated with water, with hundreds of rescues carried out overnight by more than 40 teams and dramatic vision showing people and their pets being saved from rooftops.
Meanwhile, dead cattle have washed up in some areas where livestock's been unable to escape the rising floodwaters. There's currently over 100 flood warnings in place at the time of recording, as well as more than 30 emergency level warnings urging people in various areas of the mid-north coast and inland to evacuate immediately, take shelter or move to higher ground, with one Taree resident telling Nine his town's been destroyed.
It's the worst I've seen it. Just, what can we do? It's destroyed everything in my shed. It's going to destroy my house. It's broke my heart. It has. It's broke my heart. But I feel sorry for everybody, not just me. But it's ripping my guts out.
And there was a natural hazards expert that has come out and said that this is actually the largest flood on record for this area. And to make things even more difficult, it's still bracing for the situation to get worse before it gets better because there's more flash flooding and heavy rainfall that's been forecast for today.
To the US, where Donald Trump has ambushed the president of South Africa at the White House this morning with allegations of mass killings and land seizures that he's claiming amount to a white genocide.
But you do allow them to take land.
No.
You do allow them to take land.
Nobody can take land.
And then when they take the land, they kill the white farmer. And when they kill the white farmer, nothing happens to them.
There is criminality in our country. People who do get killed, unfortunately through criminal activity, are not only white people. Majority of them are black people.
The farmers are not black.
Now, in this meeting with Cyril Ramaphosa, Trump had the lights dimmed to play this video he said showed the graves of thousands of white South African farmers before then going on to flip through a number of printed articles repeating the word death as he did. And it was a surprise to Ramaphosa, who sat there quietly as the video played but looking obviously uncomfortable and saying he had never seen the video and, as you heard, went on to refute the claims of a white genocide as baseless.
Now look, as to their particular meeting, Trump's meeting with the South African president, it comes more than 2 months after the US withdrew aid to the country and expelled their ambassador on the grounds of racial discrimination. So this is something that Trump's really hyperfixated on at the moment. And it also comes just 1 week after a group of 59 white South Africans arrived in the US with their refugee status fast-tracked by the president personally, who continues to claim they were victims of racism. Again, these are all allegations that South Africa denies.
AFL great Joel Selwood has made his first public comments following the death of his brother Adam Selwood last weekend. The family announced 41-year-old Adam's death, saying, "Words cannot express the grief and sadness we feel. Adam was a loving husband and incredible father, and that they will miss him deeply." Now, this all just comes 3 months after his twin, Troy Selwood, took his own life.
Posting to social media late last night, Joel Selwood shared some images of both of his brothers with the caption reading, "Rest up, love you brother, look after each other." The post attracted a number of comments from other current and ex-sporting figures, including Trent Cotchin, Jack Crisp, Jude Bolton, Nate Fife and Brendan Favola, who sent their love and support.
Yeah, and this news of the brothers' deaths has just devastated the AFL and the wider Australian community, and it sparked a really important conversation around mental health and the need to be openly talking about it, with calls also since made for an actual AFL mental health round to try and keep it in the spotlight. And look, just a reminder, if this story feels a little bit close to home for you and you do need some help, you can call Lifeline on 13 11 14.
Changing pace now, a groundbreaking new treatment for one of Australia's biggest killers is now available. Aussies in the early stages of Alzheimer's now have access to a new medicine which dramatically eases symptoms of memory loss and impaired thinking. The TGA's approved the medicine to treat adults who have a protein called amyloid plaque that builds in the brain, as well as a specific genetic profile that makes them more prone to the illness.
Yeah, and look, it marks the first new treatment for Alzheimer's in 25 years, and it's the first of its kind to actually address the underlying cause of the neurodegenerative disease. Now, neurologist Dr. Kathy Short says this is a huge milestone.
It is groundbreaking. It marks like a real shift in the way that we treat Alzheimer's disease. It's not a cure, it's not a magic bullet, but what it does do is it slows cognitive decline quite significantly, allowing people to live in the community for longer with milder dementia symptoms.
Look, I think that this is just incredible news. Alzheimer's, as we heard, it is one of the country's biggest killers, and it impacts around 600,000 Australians a year. And it's something particularly close to my heart because my grandma on one side has dementia, and then I also lost my granddad on the other side of my family in recent years to quite an advanced form. And it was one of the most heartbreaking experiences I have ever witnessed. And the hardest part is this lack of options that you have to try and help, and even just to stop it in its tracks or delay it. And to have it on both sides of my family, I've also always wondered whether I might even carry that gene. So to hear there's now something we can do to try and detect, diagnose and actually treat it in the early stages is just brilliant, and it will be life-changing for many families.
And it might seem Australia is joining the world in sending a big old up yours to Elon Musk this morning, with new data showing the number of battery-powered electric vehicles sold in the country is at its lowest level in 2 years. According to the Australian Automobile Association, almost 18,000 new EVs were sold in the first quarter of this year.
Yeah, that's right. And those figures are down from the more than 21,000 that were sold in the last quarter of 2024, with EVs now accounting for 6.3% of all new car sales, while hybrids, though, have boomed. Their sales almost doubling in the first 3 months of this year. Now, Chris, you did a deep dive looking into this last month, as I understand. Can we actually pin this on Elon?
I wish, but the more plausible explanation is it's more linked to these new fuel efficiency rules that the federal government has introduced, and those actually kicked in at the beginning of this year, and essentially they push traditional car makers into making more low and zero emission cars and get them into the market. So naturally, that was designed to incentivize more battery-powered and EVs hitting the market, but what it's actually done is led to more hybrids entering the market because traditional car makers still really, really want to hold on to this market. And like we heard, the stats are, in their favor. As to what slice of the pie Elon Musk can claim and how much a hatred of him is contributing to declining EV sales, I don't know. I don't know if it's as big a slice of pie we think, but I'm keen to hear from anyone listening. If you bought a Tesla and you're now regretting it because Elon's gone a little bit cuckoo, please reach out to us at The Briefing Podcast on Instagram. I'd love to hear your thoughts and whether he's kind of yucked your yum in this way.
And it certainly seems like it. Like there's a lot happening in the States. There's people protesting outside the stores, and even I've seen driving on the road these stickers that people are putting on their cars where it's like, I bought a Tesla before Elon went crazy and up with EV, down with Elon. So people are definitely making their stance known, but anyway, it's the car manufacturers. That's definitely it.
That is it for our headlines for today. Up next is my deep dive, looking into the latest with the CFMEU and how this union is still standing. My chat with investigative journalist Nick McKenzie is coming up next. Family homes firebombed with children inside, millions of dollars worth of equipment torched, and a government-backed social housing site targeted by arsonists. This is the construction sector right now in Victoria, and the signs point to one group that's allegedly trying to retighten its grip on the industry: the Construction, Forestry, Maritime, Mining and Energy Union, or the CFMEU. This latest wave of violent attacks, which have seen the homes of major construction company directors in the firing line, come 9 months after the construction arm of the CFMEU was forced into administration. And despite all the talk from state premiers and the Prime Minister of cracking down, it feels like there's been very little progress. Nick McKenzie is the award-winning investigative journalist who broke this story for The Age and 60 Minutes, and he joins us now. Nick, welcome to the briefing. Just how significant are the attacks of the last few weeks, or is this just standard practice?
Well, unfortunately, it's somewhat standard in the construction industry because what we've exposed, what we've learned over the last year is that there's been endemic corruption, standover, coercion, intimidation happening on major construction sites around the country. And it's the product of basically a racketeering organised crime like arrangement or deal between some people in the construction union, some people in building companies, and some people on major projects working together with the underworld to line their own pockets, cut secret deals and get rich quick.
Well, some of the examples featuring in your article and your story, we have house bombings, we have equipment worth millions of dollars torched. Why, in your opinion, do you think we're seeing this happening right now?
Well, so we expose this bad behaviour in the construction union, the CFMEU, and the construction sector and in building companies, the involvement of underworld figures. The Labor government, the Albanese government, responded by forcing the construction union, the CFMEU, into administration. What does that mean? The union bosses were all sacked. A very senior barrister was put in charge of the union, and this arrangement between dodgy union insiders, the underworld, building companies, suddenly was disrupted. So what we're seeing is basically the underworld moving or being flexible in response to these sweeping changes moving through the industry. Yeah, they're trying to fight for turf. They're trying to keep these dodgy deals alive. And the product of that is fresh coercion, fresh intimidation, fresh attacks on building companies, on subcontractors that are standing up to the underworld or standing up to the corrupt elements. That's why we're seeing people's homes being firebombed. That's why we're seeing equipment being torched on major sites. And that's why we're seeing violence and intimidation still flowing through the construction industry.
From your understanding, how are the police going about handling this? Is there any strategy in place? Is there an investigation underway?
The federal police are investigating. The Victoria Police, state police are investigating. And when it comes to the gangland, the underworld and organised crime, it's a really, really hard thing to investigate. It takes a huge amount of resources. People who are victims of intimidation and bikies down under, for obvious reasons, are reluctant to come forward. If they do come forward, they're reluctant to sign witness statements. It's a really difficult thing for the police to investigate. They're trying, but I guess it's an open question as to how hard they are trying and whether they have the capacity, the resources to do the job that's needed. And ultimately, the big question is for our Labor governments around the country, the Albanese government, the other government of Victoria, to really combat this crime and corruption in the construction sector, in the construction union. You need really deep, searing, wholesale change, reform and investigation. And if you were to get that, what you most likely find is that some people within the government bureaucracy knew about the problems that had taken hold, and they turned a blind eye because they wanted to basically give favours to the CFMEU, which is a long-time friend and patron of the Labor Party. So I guess what I'm saying is we've heard lots of noises from Labor governments about cleaning up the sector, but are they really, really serious about doing all that's needed? I'm not so sure.
When we talk about the CFMEU and how we've been talking about them for the last few months, we hear a lot about the standover tactics, parachuting in bikies into key positions, and a lot about the bullying. That was the most recent one that kind of came out a few months ago. We learnt more details as to what that bullying looks like. Can you rattle off, just for our listeners who might be completely unfamiliar with this story, some of the day-to-day things that the CFMEU allegedly take part of and the behaviours that they display?
Well, so everyone listening to this, I would know someone who works in the construction sector. They might have a friend, a relative, a neighbour who's a subcontractor, who holds up a stop sign outside a construction site, who's a project manager, who works for a big developer, who's a unionist themselves. We all know somebody in this sector that is absolutely massive. It is also building us the homes and apartments we hope to rent or live in or to buy one day. What's happening in the day-to-day? I mean, we had the CFMEU placing bikies, so members of outlaw bikie gangs, on sites as health and safety representatives. And these bikies were sometimes standing over those sites, demanding kickbacks, demanding favours, demanding their bikie mates get jobs. That's just one series of examples. Number one, that's terrifying. If you get a bikie on a site coming up to you, you're a traffic management company owner, you're a site project supervisor, you're just a regular worker, and you're told by a bikie who's also a union delegate to do something, you're going to do it because a bikie's telling you to do it. So beyond the fear and intimidation, why this concerns us all is there's all these added costs to a project when people on that project are doing favours for, say, bikie clubs or underworld figures. We pay for those costs. If you're looking to buy an apartment in the city, that city construction site that's built that apartment is likely to have its costs bumped up through these illegal tactics. You're funding that. You're paying the bill. As taxpayers, we're all funding these big road projects, these big rail projects, et cetera, around the country. Where there is intimidation, coercion, where you've got the underworld, dodgy unionists, dodgy companies all in bed together making a buck, rising the prices, rising the costs of those projects, we're paying for it as taxpayers. So in one way or another, it does actually affect every Australian.
How did it get so bad with the CFMEU? Is it because of the complexities of investigating, like you mentioned, or something that you're kind of touching on? Is it this idea that there's a long history of the right people making the right money to make sure that this story has just gone away?
There's certain industries where there has always been corruption, organised crime. The construction sector is one of those industries. You know, you've got the mob in New York very famously running parts of the construction sector. It happens all over the world. But what's really interesting here, it's not just about organised crime, the underworld. You've got union delegates and officials with real political power. You've got the Labor Party with obvious real political power. You've got big business and small businesses all in the mix. So it's this grouping of players who all knew that the sector was rotten and accepted that that was the way that business should be done. That's what's really unique and troubling about this scenario. And ultimately, it's not just about us as consumers of apartments buying houses or taxpayers paying for these big projects. We're paying for it. But it's about the way that this corruption, this organised crime, these issues actually bled into our political system. The construction union on Monday was helping bikies onto sites. On Tuesday, it was telling the Labor Party who to place into state and federal parliament. On Wednesday, it was placing candidates in local council elections. So the political consequences of this scandal were really significant, but the corruption was normalised. The presence of organised crime, of bikies was normalised. The whole system and all the players in it basically accepted this is the way the system is operating. And it's only now that the media has been exposing it, the government's forced to react, that we can all take a step back and say, hang on a second, this is nuts. This really important part of our economy in Australia, this massive employer of tens of thousands of people, this massive economic cog that affects the prices we pay for houses, the rent of apartments, etc. This has to clean up.
So, Nick, in your opinion, what needs to be done to clean it all up?
Well, I mean, ultimately, where there is corruption, there must be consequence. There must be accountability. Unless we actually fully confront the problems in the construction sector and make sure the CFMEU, it's now under administration, but still needs more cleaning up. The big building companies, the huge developers, the small building companies have their part to play. Unless there's a purging of this misbehaviour in the industry, then we'll keep paying the costs as a community. Organised crime will keep thriving. What needs to change? I mean, governments need to do more. State governments, the Albanese government need to do more. They need to fund the police and give the police the powers and the mandate to keep investigating and hopefully make some arrests. They need to make sure the CFMEU administrator, the new head of the union, has the power, capacity to make sure the union re-emerges as a powerful but honest force. We need building companies to actually accept corporate responsibility for their part in this massive mess. How do we achieve all those things? It's a huge ask. All we can do in the media is keep shining that sunlight in and keep raising these questions.
Nick McKenzie, thanks so much for joining us on The Briefing.
Great to be with you.
That was investigative journalist Nick McKenzie speaking with me there. And that's it for this episode of The Briefing. Before you go, be sure to leave us a comment or review, or check out our socials on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast to stay up to date with everything we got going on in briefing land. We'll be back in your feed with another episode this afternoon. But until then, I'm Chris Spyrou. I'll catch you next time.
Listener.